Everyone, it's Froggy, and I'm back again with another episode of Will a Wonderful World. Last episode was absolutely horrendous, so let's just hope this one's a lot better. So let's check. We have a lot of mail in the post.
这都是我的错。
New message, so far and yet so close.
Dios, ¿qué hice mal?
And Alicia's got pills. Well, let's start with you, because I'm sure yours is going to be a little bit better. Yeah. Yes, there we go. The simulation exam was only hours away, yet I had been lying in bed all night unable to fall asleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I could see the sketch that Mr. Wen had drawn of me earlier. It was so beautiful. I thought I should go to school earlier to try and find it in the trash can. I got out of bed, walked across the living room, and grabbed a box of chocolate milk that Rocky had paid me. The moon seemed especially round tonight. I leaned on the railing of the balcony, watching the moon and drinking the milk. Mr. Wen's place was to my right. The light was still on. Ever since I had learned that Mr. Wen lived next door, I would often involuntarily wander onto the balcony to watch the view outside. Oh god, do you have a crush on your teacher? However, I had never seen him out here even once. The curtain was always closed behind the glass door to Mr. Wen's living room. I couldn't see anything inside except to tell whether the lights were on or off. It was almost 1 a.m. The lights were still on. I didn't think that he could be up so late, despite his lights usually still being on when I had gone to bed in the past. What was he doing at this hour? It couldn't be because of what had happened earlier today. It had been only a joke. I suppose that I should go and apologize tomorrow. I suddenly heard a muffled sound. Then I noticed that his curtain moved slightly. I saw a hand appear at the bottom of the glass door. It was Mr. Wen's hand. Murder? Shut up! What was I thinking? I immediately called for an ambulance while I knocked on his door, but nobody responded. No one answered the phone in the manager's office either. I heard that people could pass out for many reasons, but the best opportunity for first aid only lasted for the first 5 minutes. It might be too late to wait for the ambulance to arrive. I grabbed a rope on the balcony and tied it around my waist. I tied the other end to the railing. Finally, I climbed up the railing and stood on top of it, shaking. Mr. Wen's balcony was approximately 1.5 meters away. My own record in long jump was 1.72 meters, if I remembered correctly. I should be alright then. 1, 2, 3, jump! The slipper had been tossed on the ground earlier. Damn it. I was so close to reaching the pipe on the other side. I was hanging between the 3rd and 4th floors. The rope tightened around my waist. Thankfully, it was strong enough to hold me. I could still make it. I held on to the rope for dear life, carefully untied the knot, and jumped onto the balcony on the 3rd floor. However, nobody seemed to be home. It took 20 minutes for the paramedics to get me off the 3rd floor balcony. By then, it was already too late for Mr. Wen. I watched helplessly as they carried him onto the ambulance. He looked like he was only taking a nap. I suddenly had a feeling of déjà vu of the day that I lost my father. No. Ewan. Well, I thought yours was going to be a little bit happier, but maybe not. Alright, pills. If someone asked me what I wanted the most in that exact moment, I would say freedom. As for the thing that I wanted second most, I would say death. 2 months ago, a short and skinny old man had bought me from the human trafficking auction house and brought me back to his mansion. At first I thought he was just like most of the other buyers who had only been looking for some exotic playthings. But I soon found out that he was much more frightening. His name was Money Jia, an infamous local millionaire in Hong Kong. On the surface, he was the owner of a chemical plant making his bucks from pharmaceutical research and development. But behind the scenes, he had been conducting drug tests on humans, and the tests were not just limited to medical drugs, but also experimental ones that were developed solely for the gangs, some of which were even from abroad. What he had spent in buying us was nothing compared to the profits that he would make off of us. All of his test subjects were people that he had purchased from the auction house. None of us had any legal status. Therefore, nobody would care who we were or where we had gone. It was like we had evaporated from the face of the earth. There were both men and women among us. Sometimes the women might get a little lucky compared to the men. If the girls were willing to become, they could be spared the fate of trying the more dangerous drugs. Rose had been one of the concubines. She had still died, though. I heard she had OD'd. After her death, her body was taken away like everyone else before her. She just disappeared without a trace. I would rather die from poison than being another Rose. The people who had made the same choice as I were all locked inside the dungeon. They had tied our hands and feet to the bedposts with our limbs spread out unnaturally. Everyone had been tied down in a separate room. However, the air ducts in the room were all connected. The air was filled with the smell of rotten flesh and death. Every few minutes I could hear horrifying screams coming from the distance. I had endured a fever for the last couple of days. I heard them saying that the drug they had been giving me was defective, and if my fever didn't come down soon, I would die. To make sure that they could extract as much profit out of me as they could, they had assigned a new doctor. He had been checking up on me every day now. This doctor seemed more bookish. He might be a good man. In my haze, I tried to talk to him. He never responded. So I kept talking to myself. After setting up my IV drip, the doctor hung the bottle of medicine on a makeshift pole that had been made out of a rusty water pipe. Then his phone rang. He walked to the hallway outside and half closed the door. His medicine kit was near my pillow. There were 2 bottles in the corner of the kit. One with sleeping pills. One with poison. The doctor was still answering the phone outside. The day had finally come. I could just grab that bottle. I could carry out the plan that I had in my mind for a long time. The rope was loose. I grabbed the pipe firmly. I wriggled my left hand out of the loosened rope and reached for the kit. I grabbed the bottle closer to my left hand, the sleeping pills. I twisted the cap off with my left hand and poured the entire bottle into my mouth. It was so painful. Then I lifted the pipe and smashed it down on my own head. I could finally end my life in hell. Carlos, I'm sorry. Your Alicia couldn't take care of you anymore. Bye. Forever, Carlos. I didn't know how long had passed. I was so surprised when I woke up. I had an oxygen mask on my face and IV tubes inserted into my arms. Some familiar guards and doctors were standing next to my bed. They had tied my hands and feet to the bedposts. The air was still filled with that rotten smell. I closed my eyes in desperation. Heavenly Father, what have I done wrong? Alicia. Yeesh! Alright, let's start, I guess. God damn. Okay. The slipper that had tossed on it. Okay, so this needs to be in third place, I think. And with sleeping pills, one with poison. The rope was loose. I grabbed the pipe firmly. Can I do that? I wiggled my left hand out of the loosened rope and reached for the kit. I grabbed the bottle closer to my left hand. It was almost the size of half of my palm. I needed to hide it somewhere. The doctor came back from his phone call. I was still lying on the bed, all spread out, my eyes closed. But when he checked my forehead, I winced. Seeing my strange reaction, he carefully examined his medicine kit again and noticed the missing bottle. There was no furniture in the room except the bed that I was lying on. Soon he found the bottle under my pillow. Once he had the bottle back, he didn't seem to be interested in giving me a hard time for it. It was as if nothing had happened. My life in hell continued. The wind was strong that night. I held onto the pipe and climbed up to Mr. Wen's balcony. Mr. Wen had fallen to the ground in his living room, and I could barely feel his pulse, and he wasn't breathing. I immediately ran through everything that I had learned about CPR in my head. I put both of my hands together, placed them upon his chest, and began pressing. 1, 2, 3. I used as much strength as I could with every press. I just hoped that I wasn't too weak to save his life. After 30 presses, Mr. Wen showed no signs of waking up, and he was still not breathing. I lifted his chin up and started doing mouth-to-mouth to him. 2 sets of mouth-to-mouth followed by 30 presses on his chest. I kept repeating this routine. Mr. Wen's forehead was covered in tiny drops of sweat. His wet hair was stuck to the corner of his eyes. Why won't you wake up? Time kept passing. It had been way over 5 minutes. But I wouldn't stop. Hope was like a flickering light on a single candle. I couldn't tell when it would suddenly go out. My tears and sweat were mixing together and falling onto Mr. Wen's shirt, drop after drop, making it wet. A rough hand grabbed my wrist. Mr. Wen's eyes slowly opened. I didn't know why I cried. I must have looked horrible with my ugly face crying. A few minutes later, the paramedics finally arrived. They asked what kind of first aid I had given to him. I suddenly realized what I had just done, and I couldn't get a word out. I just did that with Mr. Wen, with our mouths, didn't I? The ambulance had taken Mr. Wen away. The paramedics told me to bring some necessities from his first hospital stay. I finally calmed down, and for the first time that I had a chance to look around Mr. Wen's apartment. There were all sorts of paintings hanging on the walls. A small seaside town glowing in the sunset. A golden wheat field stretching endlessly. A rainbow crossing a valley through rosy clouds after the rain. They were all masterpieces. Weirdly, though, according to the signatures, most of them were from over 10 years ago. A portrait of a woman attracted my attention. The woman seemed to be in her early 20s, her long black hair spread out on a soft white pillow. Her sleeping face looked mesmerized, even to me. Was she Mr. Wen's wife? I remembered when Rocky had asked whether Mr. Wen had a girlfriend on his first day. He hadn't answered the question. But why was he living alone then? Right. I should be collecting necessities for Mr. Wen. Speaking of which, what did one need for a hospital stay anyway? Pajamas, underwear, toothbrush, toothpaste, towel, slippers, razor, face wash, napkins. I scoured the kitchen and the bathroom thoroughly. The only door left had to be the door to the bedroom. I should be able to find a change of clothes in it. I pushed the door open, and to my surprise, what was behind the door looked exactly like what had often appeared in my dreams. It was a graveyard. A graveyard of paintings. Torn apart, painted over. Pieces so small that they were completely unrecognizable. The remains of various paintings, nearly completed, filled the room. In the corner of the room, some blankets lay on the floor, with some clothes folded on top of them. Was this where Mr. Wen usually spent the night? The room made me feel nothing but sadness and utter despair. They were so much like Mr. Wen. Okay, so we got an S, but we also got a B over here, so maybe we should move this here. We could try that, because that didn't seem to get used at all, so let's try that. I wiggled my left hand out of the loosened rope and reached for the kit. I grabbed the bottle closer to my left hand, the poison. It was almost the size of half of my palm and I needed to hide it somewhere. I saw the slipper that I had dropped yesterday when I was having a seizure. It was close enough for me to reach it. The doctor came back from his phone call. I was still lying on the bed all spread out, with my eyes closed, mumbling quietly to myself. Just as he had left me. He felt my forehead with his hand and fiddled with the IV a bit, closed the kit, and left. I opened my eyes when I heard the door close. The bottle of poison was still safely hidden inside the slipper. I know that as long as I do my best, my dream will come true. There we go. Okay, we got rank S with both, which is good. Alright, well, I think I'm going to go ahead and end this episode here for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you want to see more videos from me, then don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching!